Before neurons were named, the Vedas mapped the mind. Long before laboratories, brain scans, or psychological theories existed, the ancient seers of India were already exploring the most complex frontier known to humanity, the human mind. They did not dissect it with instruments. They did not measure it with machines. They did not reduce it to chemicals or neurons. They experienced it. And what they discovered was so precise, so layered, and so deeply accurate that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to echo what the Vedas quietly knew thousands of years ago. The Vedas did not study the brain. They studied consciousness itself, the field from which the brain arises. The forgotten question. Modern science avoids. Modern neuroscience asks, how does the brain work? Which part controls memory? Which chemical causes emotion? The Vedas ask the deeper question, who is the one experiencing the mind? This single difference changed everything. While modern science looks outward, measuring electrical signals and neural activity, the Vedas looked inward, toward the experiencer behind the experience. They were not interested in what the mind does. They were interested in what the mind is made of. The Vedic view. The mind is not one thing. One of the greatest revelations of the Vedas is this: the mind is not a single entity. It is a layered system. Long before psychology divided the psyche into conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, the Vedas described the mind as a multi-layered structure with distinct functions. They identified manas, the sensory mind; buddhi, the intellect and discernment; ahamkara, the sense of I, chitta, the memory storehouse. The memory storehouse, this is not poetry, this is cognitive mapping. Modern psychology took centuries to arrive at distinctions that the Vedas outlined in metaphysical language thousands of years ago. Manas, the receiver of sensory chaos. Manas is the part of the mind that receives raw data: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. It reacts instantly. It wants comfort. It avoids pain. It seeks stimulation. In modern terms, this aligns closely with the sensory cortex, emotional reactivity, impulse-based behavior. Manas does not think. It reacts. The Vedas clearly recognize that most human suffering begins here, at the level of unchecked sensory input. This is why yogic discipline begins not with belief, but with sensory mastery, not suppression. Awareness. Buddhi, the seat of discernment above manas, is buddhi, the faculty of intelligence, not intelligence as information, but as clarity. Buddhi is the capacity to observe without reacting, choose wisely, distinguish truth from illusion. Neuroscience today calls this executive function. The Vedas described it millennia ago. But here is the crucial difference. Modern science treats intelligence as a function of the brain. The Vedas treated it as a function of consciousness, using the brain. That distinction changes everything. Asartm. Ahamkara, the maker of identity. Ahamkara literally means I maker. It is the psychological structure that says, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. Without ahamkara, survival would be impossible. But with unchecked ahamkara, suffering becomes inevitable. The Vedas understood something modern psychology is still grappling with. Most human suffering does not come from reality. It comes from identification. Trauma hurts because identity clings to memory. Fear persists because identity resists uncertainty. Ego suffers because it wants permanence in an impermanent world. The Vedas diagnosed this long before therapy existed. Chitta, the subconscious ocean. Chitta is the deepest layer of the mind. It stores memories, impressions, emotional residues, karmic patterns. Modern psychology calls this the subconscious. But the Vedas went further. They understood that chitta is not just personal, it is collective. Every experience leaves an imprint. Every reaction strengthens a pattern. Every repetition deepens a groove. This is why the Vedas emphasize purification, repetition, and awareness. They knew that unexamined impressions silently shape destiny. The mind as a tool, not the self. Perhaps the most revolutionary idea in the Vedas is this: you are not your mind. This insight predates modern psychology by thousands of years. The Vedas observed that the mind changes, thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, identity shifts over time, yet something remains constant: the witness, the observer, the awareness behind the mind. Modern neuroscience still struggles with this problem, known as the hard problem of consciousness. The Vedas never struggled with it. They started from it. Why meditation exists in Hinduism? Meditation was not invented to relax the mind. It was designed to observe it, to watch thoughts arise, to see emotions form, to notice identity fluctuate. In doing so, the practitioner slowly realizes, I am not what I think. This is not philosophy, it is direct psychological insight. And it predates Freud, Jung, and cognitive science by millennia. Neuroscience is catching up. Slowly today, neuroscience confirms what the Vedas implied. Thoughts arise before conscious awareness. The sense of self is constructed. Attention reshapes neural pathways. Awareness can observe brain activity. Meditation is now shown to rewire neural circuits, reduce ego-centered processing, enhance emotional regulation, quiet default mode activity. But the Vedas already knew this. They simply described it differently. Where science says neuroplasticity, the Vedas said samskara can be purified. Different language, same truth. Why the Vedas focused on experience, not theory. The Vedas never asked you to believe. They asked you to observe. No blind faith, no dogma, no fixed belief system. Everything was experiential. If something did not lead to clarity, it was discarded. That is why the Vedas survived. Because they were not belief systems, they were inner sciences. The mind is a field, not a machine. Modern science treats the mind like hardware. The Vedas treated it like a field that can be clouded or clear, agitated or still fragmented or unified. And just like a lake reflects the moon only when still, consciousness reveals truth only when the mind is calm. This metaphor appears again and again in Vedic texts, not poetically, scientifically. Why silence was central to Vedic practice. If the mind is noise, silence is clarity. The Vedas understood that insight does not arise from thinking harder. It arises when thinking stops. This is why silence was considered sacred, not because sound is evil, but because silence reveals what sound hides. The real discovery of the Vedas. The greatest discovery of the Vedas was not God. It was not ritual. It was not philosophy. It was this: the mind is not the master, it is the instrument. And the one who learns to observe it gains freedom. Why this knowledge was timeless. Civilizations rose and fell. Languages changed, empires collapsed, but the human mind remained the same. Fear, desire, attachment, identity, suffering. The Vedas addressed the root, not the symptom. That is why they are still relevant. Not as religion, but as inner science. The final truth the Vedas whisper: you are not broken. You are not incomplete. You are not lacking. You are simply identified with your mind. And the moment you see the mind as something you have, not something you are, you step into the same realization the ancient seers reached. Not through belief, not through worship, but through awareness. That is why the Vedas still stand, not as books, not as doctrines, but as mirrors, showing humanity what it has always been and quietly forgotten.